Hello, continuing with our invader project, making our enemies, and finally we have most of the game set up, but we need more than one bad guy to shoot. So we're going to make multiple enemies. We're going to do it in a way that uses lists in order to keep track of the bad guys. This is not the cleanest way. There are better ways to do it. This is the way that makes sense based on what I've been teaching in my class so far. And, well, it's the way we're going to do it. So, it gets the job done. It's just not pretty. Ideally, there'll be some future videos where we kind of deconstruct what went wrong with this technique and how there's better techniques that we could use to solve it. But they take kind of a different mindset, and we're going to continue on with the mindset that we're in. So that is my apology at the beginning. If somebody happens to see this that understands programming and starts to scoff at it, that's what's going on. When we last left off, we had gotten all of our collisions to work. We're at a point in our video or in our game, where the bad guy can shoot at us, he can hit us, and we can go down to 0 lives. We can hit him, and he respawns at the top of the charts. He also continues on down the screen. He's moving fairly slow right now. That's on purpose, just for testing purposes. There he goes, shooting at me. And that's what we have. I've made a few little changes to the game that you might not have seen before, such as the score and the lives at the top, mostly to keep track of our collisions, so I can get points, and my lives can go down. Right here, you may need to pause the video. I will also be posting this link in a couple places, but actually, timeout. There we go. Right here is the Code Sculptor URL that you could use to get to this if you needed to see it. You could pause the video and write that down, or again, follow a link that I'll create. But right now in a screenshot of this, I can't really do that. So that is the code, and if you need to get to it, feel free, just because of those small changes I've made. This is a version of the code where I've spelled the word missile wrong, and I apologize. Anyway, let's get going. There's a few little changes we're going to make at first to set us up for what we want to do. And one of those changes is here in our global variables. Right here we have our enemy, and our enemy is located to start the game at 3030. This variable I placed right in the middle of a bunch of variables for the player, while down here there's other enemy variables. We are going to just cut it and paste it down here. You could even throw in a comment where these are kind of the player variables, and down here is the enemy variable, so you can kind of group them a little bit better. Don't need the space there either. So just a little cleanup there just to put all these together. We're going to make one other change up here. I guess we'll do it now. Enemy speed. Enemy speed I had as a list that kept track of an X and a Y speed, basically the velocity in the X-axis and velocity in the Y-axis. In Space Invaders, we really don't need velocity in the Y-axis. And I was putting that in there kind of for learning's sake and for future branches where you might want to make things move in a different direction. For us, however, where we are now, we don't need that anymore. What we really want is we just want our enemy speed to be a variable, not a constant, but something that's just going to start. And for all of our enemies, we're going to have this. Boy, I wish I had set up a picture ahead of time. Maybe I can quick draw one. Well, no, I'll do that in a second. We should finish this. Okay, so enemy speed. All right, I've collapsed most of my functions. We're going to make one quick change to our move enemy function. What we said in the past was we said if our enemy's not there, initialize him. This is what respawned him. So he would spawn at this point, he would have some speed, and if we shot him, he would respawn again. We're going to do it differently as we create this game because we're going to have 25 enemies on the screen and we don't want them to respawn every time we shoot one of them. So we are going to just bloop delete this entire section. Bloop, see I told you. And get rid of a little space. That leaves us with an else statement, which is pretty silly. So we don't want to do that. So we're just going to say if enemy on, and then we have all that. Now, one thing has got to change here, and again, we might as well do it now. Our enemy speed is no longer a list, it's just a plain old enemy speed, so we'll fix that up. And that gets us a little bit closer to being ready for what is to come, which is adding a bunch of lists. So if I'm over here in Keynote, if I added a quick slide, can I make blank slides here? What I want to show you is, here is our enemy. It's not a very exciting enemy, but here he is going across the screen, right? You can even see right here, see how it tells you the X and Y of this thing as I move it? So that's kind of similar to what we're doing. And so when we have one enemy, it's really easy to just have something like an enemy X value and an enemy Y value. Now we stored that in a list and such, but I mean, it's like there it is right there at that center point. That's where it is enemy X and enemy Y. As soon as we add another enemy, like, hey, I want one right here, right? Then I have to either create a new variable, right? Like I could say, oh, well, this is enemy 2X and enemy 2Y. And then think of all the code that we've created for the enemy. We would have to duplicate that code. And then we create another enemy, and we say, okay, let's duplicate this one again. And so now we have enemy 3X. I think we'd have more luck if we thought of this as a list, and we thought of this as like, this is enemy 0. This is enemy 1. And of course, this is enemy 2. It takes longer to draw this than it does for you to get the concept, of course. And, instead of having this, what we would have is we would have the enemy's X and we would have a value, right? This is like position 1 and enemy Y position 1. And this is enemy X position 0. And so on and so forth. So it's basically just saying, let's keep one variable name and make positions in it. That's what lists are. And then if we add a third one, a fourth one, a fifth one, all we have to do is make a loop that can go through and change each one instead of writing new code over and over again. So it's a great solution. It's just that it's a solution that's going to take a little bit of rewriting of our current code. So up here, where we have our enemies, all of these values, except for enemy speed, these are now values that need to be set up in a list. And this one indeed, and this one need to be set up in a list of a list, because they are already lists, and that confuses some people. But there's no problem there. It will just happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to take each of those values. We're going to keep the ones down there. These are fine. Just leave them there for reference for a second. And we are going to say enemy location as now an empty list, just so the computer knows. Python now says, okay, there's a list that's going to exist. We don't care what's in it right now. We just want to make it empty. And we're going to do that for each one. Now, enemy speed, like I said, that one we're just going to keep simple. We want all of our enemies to move at the same speed. If you were making a game where you wanted enemies moving at different speeds, sure, add enemy speed to this list and keep track of each separate speed. For us, enemy speed is the one that we can get away with being nice and simple. So let's just keep it that way. Now the big question is, in Space Invaders, you may know, like we have these, and then we have a whole nother row of them. And it's going to be easiest for us if we kind of just take it one row at a time for right now. Once we get one row set up, then we can add the second row, no problem. Honestly, that part's easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on one row, but we'll call these columns, right? So the big question is, how many columns of enemies do we want to have right now? And so I'm going to make a variable for that. I'm going to make a variable called columns. And I think 5 is a nice normal amount of them, and we could add more as we go. But right now I like 5. And we are going to make a little for loop. And again, if you know programming, there's better ways to go through lists than for loops that use numbers, but it works. And it's simple enough to do it this way. All these things are going to go in the for loop, so they need to be indented. Again, enemy speed is the one exception. So now, when we have something that is a list, enemy location is now an empty list, we can't set it to be equal to something. Instead, what we can do is we can append something onto it. So what we did is we just said, okay, take this value, 3030, and just add it into the list. And then, of course, it runs this for loop, which means run it again another time, and add another one into the list, and add another one. Do it for this many times, 5 times. So we're going to take all these equal signs, and we're going to change them to append. We're going to change some values too, but we'll do that in a second. All right. The other thing is, remember when we got rid of, down below, we got rid of the move enemy that initialized stuff. This is basically right here the starting values of our enemies now. So enemy on, for instance, is going to be true. We want our enemies to start on the screen, not to be disappeared right away. Our enemy missile, well, we don't want him shooting the moment he comes on the screen, so these we're going to keep false. And then our location is the trickiest one. We want our enemy to be located somewhere. How far down do we want him to be located? Well, let's just say 100. Like his Y value may be 100. But the X value has to change. We want enemy 1 to be, on the left side of the screen. Oops, that's the wrong thing. That'll confuse you. And then we want enemy 0 we want on this side. Enemy 1 we want over here. Enemy 2 we want over here. So the X value is changing, right, as we go through this. So the neat thing is that we can take a number like 100, and we can multiply it by C, which is the number that's being used here in our for loop. And so the first one will be set at 0, because 100 times 0. The next one will be 100 times 1, then 100 times 2, 100 times 3. And so it'll place them automatically at regular intervals for us, which is cool. So this initializes. Yeah, I know, you want to say, oh, you initialized a bunch of bad guys, let's press play, but it's not that simple. Now, here's the issue. Every time in the code that we reference these variables, enemy location, enemy on, it's going to say, well, those are lists, right? And we're going to say, no, we're not using them as lists right now because, we didn't create them as lists down here. So everywhere in the code that these values come up, we've got to make some changes down here. All right, now collide, we can take a look. Collide is a nice abstract function that just takes two objects and see if they're hitting each other. We don't care about that. Collisions, do we have enemy? Oh, I see enemy on. I see enemy location. So yes, indeed. And that makes sense, right? Like we want to be able to collide with every enemy on the screen, not just with one of them anymore. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this idea of a for loop and we're going to use it. In fact, you could copy this because we're going to use it in multiple places. So we're going to say, you know what? Don't just do this for one enemy. Do this for every enemy. But you have to think about what it is that we're doing. We're going to take every single enemy and compare them to our one missile, which means we want to do all of this. Then we have to take every single enemy's missile, because if we have 5 different enemies shooting on the screen, each one can shoot their own missile. So this also has to be part of the loop, and so does this have to be part of the loop. So what we want to do is we want to highlight every single thing in this function. So except for the global, everything, and then we're just going to hit tab and move them all over so that they're inside the loop now. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say, oh, guess what? Enemy location is a special kind of list now. Yes, we still have the location of the Y value here, but first we have to tell it which enemy are we looking at, and I called that enemy C, right? Just for the column. It's like column 0, column 1, column 2. I know I copied and pasted something else a second ago. I'm going to copy this. Everywhere where you see the enemy location, you're going to want to paste this in. So I just did 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can pause the video and catch up. Missiles do not have that. Missiles are plain. They're not the enemy. But here, the enemy on is, there's more than one enemy, and we only want to turn one of them off, so we're going to paste it there. The score, no. Missiles, no. Player, no. The enemy's missile location. Yep, that's one that's going to change based on each single one. So we've got another 4 lists to add right there. The good guy, no, the good guy's good, right? The player, he doesn't need to have it. But if we collide with the missile and we have to test it, which missile are we talking about? That missile better turn off, and that enemy's trigger better turn off. So there's 3 more. So again, you might want to pause. Let me see if I can set this up so you can see. No, it's too much stuff. There's our loop as a whole, and you can go through here and try to find all the C's. In fact, there they all are. So you can pause that if you would like. And there's going to be one more change we're going to make in this, and I wonder how I get rid of those C's. Well, that's all right. We'll keep them for now. I guess I could just search for nothingness. Okay. Right here, I'm going to zoom back in a little bit. This, why not a little bit more, make it easier on your eyes. This comment right here, we're seeing if the enemy is interacting with our missile. And the missile has to be on, right? Well, there's another little fluke, which is that we also want to make sure, because the enemies don't respawn anymore, we want to make sure that the enemy is on as well. Otherwise, we'll start hitting invisible enemies. So we just got to take that and turn that one right there off, so we can handle that. All right, let's shrink down our collisions. The enemy movement. Do we think this one needs a list? Well, of course so. We're moving enemies, and we have a lot of enemies to move. So we're going to take that same for C and range 0 through columns. We're going to take this and hit tab. And then we're ready to put in anywhere where we're talking about more than one enemy. Enemy on gets it. Enemy location gets it. Ooh, enemy speed does not get it, so I forgot to delete this before. Glad I came back to it. Enemy location gets it. Enemy location gets it. Enemy speed doesn't get it. Enemy location gets it. Ooh, hold on, I was just trying to find the C's for you so you can see them. There they are. We don't even have to think too hard. If you get the concept of what we're doing, it's just kind of plugging it now and saying, okay, fine, all these things are lists. It's confusing, but I'll buy it. And then we just have to go through and look for where they might be. Moving our player, well, that doesn't have a list, that's fine. Moving our missile, same thing, that's fine. Shooting, that's fine. Now, some of you may want to eventually shoot more than one bullet at a time. In Space Invaders, we don't have to worry about this. We shoot one bullet. It's the rule of Space Invaders. But if you wanted to shoot more than one bullet at a time, your missile is now a list. I'm going to make a video on that just so you can go through it and see what would change. But you could take what you learned here and apply it, and the same thing would happen. Then you'd have to change move missile. You'd have to choose player shoot. Let's take a look at our enemies shooting. We're going to put in our for loop. We're going to highlight everything on it. We're going to hit tab. Yes, our enemy has to trigger. Now, I bet you we want our enemies to fire less often, because if we have 5 of them firing the same rate, we're going to get a lot of bullets on the screen. Let's see, so a few more. So that one was filled with them. But again, you highlight it, you tab it over, and you just find where you have to put them. You can pause if you need to. I'll move on. And here we go, move missile. It's really not that much work for something that ends up being a game changer as far as how fun the game is, I'll tell you that. Now, there's a good chance I've missed some. You might be screaming at your screen that I should be paying more attention. That may be. Take a look at that one, and I'll close it back up again. You can pause it. 3, 2, 1, pause. And we're back. Closing. Key up and key down, they're not going to be an issue. And our draw is the last place. If we go ahead and take a look at our draw, we'll pause here for just a second. We draw our good guy. We draw our enemy. Aha, well, that was going to have to be changed, right? We need to draw more than one enemy. Then we draw our missile, and we draw the enemy's missile. Well, we have to draw more than one of these as well. So this one and this one are kind of special, while missile and the good guy are plain. I'm going to take this, cut it, and paste it up here. And ruin, I always do that. So now our good guy and our missile are together, and our two like our enemy and our enemy missile are together. So here then is where I want to make my for loop. You know, and then it's like for each enemy. Oh, I should have hit tab on these, but I'll just do it that way. So this one's only got a couple places. Our enemy on, our enemy location, our E-missile. Our E-missile location has a few of them. And down here, this is just the color, so you don't have to worry about that. All right. Unless I missed something, in which case, oh, I was going to print something out so you could see what's going on, but hey, let's just see if it works first. So I go ahead and hit the save button. I feel like this is a good time to save. Whoa, now you saw a little slowdown there as it got going, and you'll see that whoa, I told you it was going to be firing way too fast at us. Oh, but it's fun. It's a challenge now. Now look what's happening with the movement. The movement's kind of funny. Ooh, we're getting rain out of nowhere. So we must have forgotten to say if the enemy was off, he's not allowed to shoot. So that's tricky. Ah! Yeah, I can just hide over here. Okay, I won. Unfortunately, I will keep on dying because they're shooting at me. All right, pretty fun. And it worked on my first try. The only thing that didn't work was my movement. So let's go back to enemy move for 1 second. And what's happening is right here, we're getting our enemies hitting the edges, right? Hitting the 0 or hitting the width. And then just that one enemy is getting moved down. So it's like the guy who hits the edge is the guy who gets to move, and nobody else does. Sometimes I do it in a different way, and I think it's when my speed was a list where it ends up, they all end up following each other like a caterpillar almost. Oh man, there's a game called Centipede, and kind of looks like Centipede. That'd be fun to make. But anyway, the problem is basically in this line, because we don't want just one guy to move. We want every guy to move. And that's going to take another for loop, which feels a little bit like a hack. Like it seems like there should be a way to say, okay, just take all these and move them all at once, like change them all. I can't figure out how to do that. No, not if, for. Now I can't use C again because C I'm already using it. I can't do like the same thing in a for loop, right? So I was thinking about saying like width, because I'm kind of back to thinking about them as, you know, a wide thing. So instead of moving C, which is just the particular one we're looking at, we're going to do W. What this is saying is take a quick break from all the rest of the game and run a loop that's just this, and add 25 to every single bad guy in my columns. And that's all we need. And now they should move better, like in more. Oh man, this is tough. Boom. Oh man, I just feel like I need the sound effects for Space Invaders now, and I'm gonna live. All right, I am done with this video because I feel like it's going on long enough. Sure, there's some adjustments we could do, especially the fact that well, you know what? There is that idea of them shooting when they shouldn't be shooting. So let's take a quick look at that, and then I'll be done. Let's see. Hey, enemies shooting. Why are you shooting so often? something to me about this, like we say, hey, if the enemy decided to trigger and the missile is not on, but we never said that the enemy had to be on. We could do it in many different places. What if we said the enemy trigger can only be true if the enemy is actually on? So we could say it right here. If enemy on C. Now I could just leave this like this in one line because it's just one thing I want to do. If you like to kind of read and keep things tabbing, you might do it that way. Now let me see if I shoot some. Now that guy just fired right before he left, so that was okay. That seems to have calmed down, right? So the more you shoot, the more calm they are. Which means it gets easier as it goes. Well, that doesn't seem right. Okay, so I lied. One more thing we're going to change, because this is the fun one. Up here in my collision, in Space Invaders, every time you shoot, it gets a little bit faster. It's actually a funny story that from what I've read, the developer of Space Invaders didn't mean for that to happen, but the loops that we're creating here, and we're about to add another one in the next video, actually slowed the processor down because, you know, we're talking 1983, 81 technology, and these loops actually, you know, made lag. And so it started really slow just because the loop was slow. But the more he shot people, the less there was in a loop to do. And so it got faster and faster as it went. And he, again, from what I read, he kind of got done with that and said, that was cool. So what if we take the enemy's speed and we increase it a little bit? You know, what if we increase it by a factor of 0.1? So every time you shoot, it gets a little bit faster. Enemy speed, we've never used it before in this collisions area, so we're going to have to add it to the global list, right? Just let me shrink down a little bit so you can see this. All right. So, oh man, that beginning when it is a little jaggedy at the beginning. We may want to draw things to the screen. Well, let's see, that happened pretty quick and I couldn't even see if it was doing it. If we make this collision too fast, things are going to get crazy. But what if we double the speed every time we shoot somebody? Oh boy, I saw that. Oh boy. I can't get this guy. Oh dear. Okay, so doubling may be tricky. Somewhere between 1.1 and 2 would probably be the best. So that first one is a little subtle. By the time you get here, he's going, that's pretty good, right? He's going not bad. I got him easily. All right, video's done. Come back if you want to add rows, though. That's going to be sweet.